world has changed. America has changed. If something were to happen tomorrow, how self-sufficient would you be? Could you grow your own food? Could you sustain your own livestock? Could you survive? This is the We Grow Our Show with Nick and Don. Nick and Don talk about everything from politics to planting. They cover techniques, methods, and tips on how to not only survive, but thrive. Visit the website at WeGrowOurs.com. Lock and load. This is the We Grow Our Show. Get your grow on.
Welcome back to the We Grow Our Show. It's time to get your drink on. Just kidding. We're going to talk about alcohol today, not for drinking.
For fuel.
For fuel.
Yeah. I was hoping it was kind of for drinking. I don't know.
No, Don. No drinking.
We talk about how to brew your own beer.
Just ferment some yeast in your barley hops.
That's part of We Grow Ours, is fermenting your own beer. I am a beer drinker. That's about the only alcohol I drink. Of course, the bottle of wine last night was good. That doesn't count.
I don't drink, but if I were a drinker, I'd see myself in the microbreweries trying their,
they're so good.
The attention to detail. If you're going to drink, don't go and just get drunk.
No.
Appreciate artisans.
I got home yesterday. We're not a drinking family. My wife hardly ever drinks. I don't drink very often. We very rarely have beer or anything in the house, but we always have a little bit of wine. In case somebody comes over, we've got some wine. And I walk in, my wife's cleaning, and she's got a bottle of wine in her hand. And she just looks at me. I was like, that bad of a day? She's like, oh, yeah. So she was carrying it from, like, the laundry room, and she wanted
it, like, attached to her hip.
She wanted to chill it. So we broke it open. My mom had gotten it for her birthday. And it was an awesome white wine, which we're normally not white wine drinkers. It was so good. We actually polished off that bottle last night. So it doesn't happen very often, but the days her mom calls and she has to clean the house, a bottle of wine comes in handy.
Yeah.
So
that's funny. That would drive me to drinking, I think, just from the stories.
Yeah.
But anyway, again, like I said, I don't drink.
That's right.
I don't condone it, but I'll drive you home if you're drunk.
There you go. Well,
speaking of driving and alcohol.
Yeah.
Let's get back
Let's get
on
the cars
topic.
drunk.
Yeah, seriously. So we're going to have a guy on. His name's David Blume.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to have him on because we had a conversation at the Prepper Fest, and he's my new hero.
Oh, this guy knows his alcohol, and he's not a drinker of it.
No. And I look forward to having him on. This is awesome. This is something that I've wanted to do in my backyard on a larger scale. And I've fermented a few things, grass clippings included, and was able to extract alcohol from it. I wasn't very efficient with it, and it was a lot of check and guess and check and failures, but
that's what it's about, though.
Yeah, and that's fine if you're in your garage and you've got the time to do that. Well, now I don't. Now I want somebody with some answers. Now I want somebody that has already figured it out so I don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I want a system I can apply to what I have going now.
Right.
I think that this guy's got the answers there. So do we have anything else to talk about, or should we bring him on?
Let's just bring him on.
Awesome. All right. Next up, Mr. David Blume.
Things just got real. The drugstore is closed and the doctor is unavailable. What are you going to do? Stock your medicine cabinet and bug-out bag with nature's alternative, essential oils. Visit mylavenderlife.com for all your essential oil needs.
Welcome back to the We Grow Our Show. We've got a special guest on the line, man after my own heart, an alternative fuels junkie, maybe, I don't know. Mr. David Blume, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great, Nick.
We're glad to have you on the show. I'm actually a big fan of alcohol, and no, I don't drink it.
Well, as we say at my company, Blume Distillation, drink the best and drive the rest. So, yes, making your own alcohol is theoretically a beverage, but it tastes so bad you might as well just put it in your car, which is what we do.
That's good. I actually, you're talking to a couple, I don't know if we're called conspiracy theorists or not, but I have a theory that prohibition had nothing to do with temperance movement or the immorality of drinking alcohol, but it was all to do with the widespread of alcohol use as a fuel. What are your feelings on that?
Well, you're partly right, and it's also partly true. Basically, the women's Christian temperance movement, the people who don't want you to drink, the little old grannies with their umbrellas going into bars, batting people about the head, saying, lips that touch alcohol will never touch ours. Well, those were real people, the temperance movement. They'd been around and completely ineffective since the mid-1800s. But they found common cause with very well-known industrialists who funded them to the tune of $4 million to go into Congress and pass legislation to ban the making, transportation, or use of alcohol for any purpose, not just drinking. And so they not only passed that legislation, but it was a constitutional amendment, which, civic students, what's the percentage of that you need to have a constitutional amendment?
2/3.
Go on, Nick. You got it, 2/3. So that, when can you get Congress 2/3 to ever agree to anything? So, but they did agree on banning alcohol, which became known as prohibition. But that industrialist that funded the women's Christian temperance movement was none other than our buddy Rockefeller, John D. Rockefeller. And as you suspected, it had nothing to do with drinking, but it had everything to do with getting rid of the competition, which had over 50% of the fuel market, alcohol fuel. So, history is always written by the victors.
Of course.
So the people who are conquered never get to tell their version of the history. And so we see lots of history of prohibition about, gangsters and floozies and speakeasies, but never about the political battle of an all-male Congress voting to prohibit alcohol when women didn't even have the vote yet. That didn't come for about 9 years. So, yes, the political reality is covered over in the history. You can call that a conspiracy theory, but, the alternative, if you're not a conspiracy theorist, is you're a coincidence theorist. Junk just happens, right, by itself.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
Conspiracy theorists just say, people get together and do things. And, nothing ever happens without that. So, it's not, there are many things in life we find out that powerful interests get together and decide the way things are going to be. And that's not conspiracy. That's just business as usual.
So I've got to ask you, do you think that this really affected the fuels market moving forward from prohibition until now?
No, I don't think it affects where we are today because that was long ago, and alcohol has risen multiple times to have its head chopped off by oil over and over again. So any one incident is not the cause of our being addicted to oil. It's the cumulative 100-year battle of oil against alcohol, which is why we're here today.
So are we on the winning edge of that sword or the losing edge?
Well, if you ask me, and you are asking me, I think we're about to take over because although oil has had its day, they finally are running out of the stuff. And long before we actually run out of it, as it becomes more scarce, it will become too expensive to use as fuel. So, it'll be still made for what's considered really important uses like, making nylon fabric or fiberglass or linoleum floors or all the stuff that they really make money on with oil, not the gasoline. See, gasoline is the byproduct of making all those valuable things, and it's the garbage left over in the refinery. It's never two days are never alike for gasoline. 450 different chemicals from different chemical processes end up in the gasoline. So in the future, that stuff that's left over, every bit of it will be valuable to make high value products that'll never be burned in cars once, oil is out there, in the $300, $400, $500 a barrel range, which, as things become scarce, they become more expensive. And it's not that far in the future, less than 10 years before we'll see that.
So, David, you've been doing this now for 25 plus years from what I gather. Where do
That's
you,
correct.
Where are we today? And, tell us a little bit about what you do and where you've brought alcohol as a fuel.
Well, I'd like to say I've brought it farther than it has, but my effectiveness has been to raise the international awareness of alcohol. Via my book, Alcohol Can Be a Gas, which is now the worldwide curriculum for universities around the world to teach students about renewable energy. I've also invented quite a few things that make alcohol cheaper to produce and focused on all the different things we can make alcohol from instead of corn or sugarcane, which are the things we commonly hear about. Now, where we're going in the future, you couldn't tell from America. If you're standing here in America, it looks like alcohol, alcohol is 10% of the market, which is respectable, but it's not like what it could be. If you get out of America, you find a different situation. And the biggest glaring example the oil companies hate that it exists is Brazil. Brazil no longer imports any oil for transportation. All of the cars in Brazil, 95% of the cars in Brazil run on alcohol. The remaining cars run on 75% gasoline with 25% alcohol, but those are fading away over time. These are cars pre-fuel injection that are, you're talking all the way back in
that needed the lead.
Early 80s, these vehicles were made. So they start to drop out of the fleet, and within a handful of years, probably Brazil will not have any more gasoline for sale at the pump, even with 25% alcohol in it. So this is not your little tiny country for those of you who are geographically challenged out there, as Michael Moore would say. This
You're
is
really quoting Michael Moore.
Well,
just
Michael
kidding.
Moore is my hero for, absolutely causing trouble at every turn. So,
okay, I'll give you that. That's for sure. He does like to stew that pot. Stir it, rather.
Yeah. So at any rate, he was chased out of the country. He can't even live here anymore because he's caused so much trouble. So that, you got to respect a guy like that for that alone. So anyway, so what we're talking about, though, is that in the rest of the world, alcohol is already becoming the rule, not the exception. I'm going to be speaking at the Renewable Energy for Latin America conference later this month in Puerto Rico, and we're the keynote speaker because there's been such acclaim for wanting to switch to alcohol in virtually every country in Latin America after hearing about Brazil's success. So
Wow.
we have talked to the energy ministers of the whole Caribbean basin, also all the ag ministers. They all are waiting for some of our technological developments to start implementing alcohol in their countries, because what we focus on is what can you do on the small scale. And by small scale, I mean, 1% is big as the giant alcohol plants in the Midwest running on corn. They run on like 100 million gallons a year. So we're talking about 1 million gallons a year, maybe 2 or 3 million gallons a year as a local regional distillery to fuel thousands and thousands of cars in your community. And if you need more alcohol, then another plant sprouts up, probably using a different raw material. And, a proliferation of decentralized plants that are extremely profitable, but totally regional and local.
You talk about doing this, and one of the things, we're going to go back into this conspiracy theory, but the government, the media outlets, you always hear that they're against alcohol as a fuel because you have to grow corn, and we're going to take all the corn away from cattle and the people, and we're wasting all this land to grow fuel. So how are you combating that?
Well, it's pretty tough. The American Petroleum Institute spends about $3 billion to create those myths, which have no basis in fact. They count on the ignorance of the American public of farming and agriculture to pull this off. So, it's a question of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. That's a very powerful mantra. So, the truth. 40% of America's corn is diverted into alcohol plants. wow, that's true. But you're left with the impression that when the corn goes into the alcohol plant, it's destroyed, and now it's not available for food. So the whole truth is, yes, 40% of corn is diverted into alcohol plants. But what comes out is alcohol and what's called distiller's grains. Now, what's the difference between distiller's grains and the corn that went in? The distiller's grains have had the starch removed. We make alcohol from starch. We don't make it from protein. We don't make it from fat. We don't make it from minerals. We make it from starch. Now, starch is not digestible by cows. They're made to eat woody brush, and when you feed them starch, they just get bloat. They have all kinds of problems, and they poop it out undigested. So it's a waste.
In fact, you have to build up the tolerance for cattle. I'm actually a cattleman by birth, really. And
well, so grass is much better to feed cows, and brush too, rather than starch.
You're just not going to get the nice marbled meats. That's all.
Well, you have, as every vegetarian knows, you get 10 pounds if you were to feed them straight corn, which of course we don't. We mix it with other things like soybeans. Mm-hmm. But you get 10 pounds of manure for every pound of meat that you generate. So that's a really lousy ratio. The reason why that ratio is so bad is 7 of those 10 pounds are starch going out of the manure. Now, you look at chickens. Chickens can digest starch, so it only takes 3 pounds of feed to make 1 pound of chicken. Well, the difference is not wasting the starch. So here's the point, though. If you take the starch out and make it into alcohol, the remaining distiller's grains have all the protein, all the fat, and everything that made that grain really valuable. And so you end up getting 17% more meat if you feed distiller's grains to cows than the original corn. This has been borne out over 100 years of studies by the USDA. So the clearest way I can make that illustrated is there's these guys called the revenuers, right? They're looking for people making alcohol who aren't paying the taxes. Well, the way they find out which farmer was making alcohol is they go to the county fair and they look who had the fattest pigs and the nicest looking cattle with the biggest, haunch. And they know that those farmers were feeding their animals mash, and they'd show up the next day after the county fair at the farm and bust them for making alcohol. And they wondered who sold them out. And the answer is they sold themselves out by bragging that they were raising their cattle on mash. This is kind of like standing next to your medical marijuana plant and putting your arm around the plant and having a picture taken, and trying to deny in court that that plant. I don't know that plant, So, the idea is that everyone has known that mash makes superior animal feed.
Okay, and actually we had an idea of using mash as well in black soldier flies, which is something else that we covered. But all right, I'll ask you a question. I think that we talked about it a little bit the last time we met. But how do you replace diesel fuel? Is that something that alcohol? Because we need to be able to run trucks, and trucks don't run on gasoline right now.
Well, that's diesel. It's true. You're absolutely right that heavy-duty applications, over-the-road diesel trucks, big tractors, harvesters, all of that runs on diesel fuel, which is distinctly different than alcohol, and distinctly different than gasoline. So alcohol immediately replaces gasoline with the most minor changes. The difference between alcohol and diesel fuel is when it explodes. So diesel works by squeezing the fuel so hard that it gets to a certain temperature and then explodes on its own without a spark. So alcohol has a high octane reading, 106 actually, which is great for a gasoline engine and terrible for a diesel engine. Because what it means is it won't explode, it won't explode, it won't explode, and then it blows up too late in the cycle, causing damage to the engine. So the way that you deal with that to make a diesel engine run properly, and again, this is a diesel engine converted to alcohol, okay? Mm-hmm. So the way you can do that, for instance, is if you mix alcohol with biodiesel, because they're totally mixable, the two of those. If you put the majority of the fuel alcohol and the rest of it biodiesel, when the fuel gets squeezed, the biodiesel goes off first and takes the alcohol with it, and you have to do no modifications to the engine other than to make sure that your hoses and all that are biodiesel tolerant. They're already alcohol tolerant, but you got to make sure they're biodiesel tolerant. Older hoses can be softened by biodiesel. So if you have old hoses, you can replace them, and that's about it. Now, there are other ways to do it. For instance, in Sweden, big city buses in Sweden are made by the Scania company, and for 30 years they've run on pure alcohol. You know, although they look like diesel engines, they run on twice the compression ratio. In other words, twice the squeezing of a diesel engine, and they've been running those for 30 years on pure alcohol with no problems. Cummins Diesel has just come out with a brand new alcohol engine. So in many ways, it's like a diesel engine. It squeezes fuel until it explodes without a spark plug. But it's optimized for alcohol. And alcohol provides so much more power than diesel that an engine half the normal size, a 2.9 liter, will put out the same power as a 6.3 liter diesel engine with better mileage. So when you engineer for alcohol, which is a superior fuel, you end up with more power, better mileage, and half the size engine to do it. And Cummins has announced that they will come out over this next year or so with a series of engines that go all the way from car-sized through tractor-trailers, optimized to only run on alcohol and replace diesel engines. So
that is the answer I'm looking for, man. That's what wowed me when we were at the show. I had no idea.
Well, there are many.
Oh. No, continue. I was giving you praise, but continue.
I'll take the praise, but I didn't invent it. You know, I've been saying for years, if you do these things to optimize for alcohol, you'll get a superior engine. I'm not the only one to say that, because we've been running diesel-like engines on alcohol since the early 1900s. But what's important is Cummins Diesel, largest diesel engine manufacturer in the world, has voted for the future. They are saying that diesel is on its way out, and the way the world is going to power itself is alcohol, and they are stepping out first to make the super optimized engines for alcohol. And right now, the FedEx van-sized engine has a couple of thousand hours of testing on it, and later this year they'll be officially ready to start selling it. And these are indestructible, diesel-heavy kind of engines, but the difference between diesel and gasoline and alcohol is no carbon ends up in the engine when you burn alcohol. It burns completely. So what wears out gasoline and diesel engines is the carbon, which blackens the sides of the inside of the cylinder and acts like microscopic sandpaper, wearing out the inside of the engine. Alcohol engines stay bright, shiny, clean on the inside. The oil never turns black. So you've got engines now that Cummins is going to be building that will last 2 million miles before having to be replaced. So that's about 3 times as long as the average diesel engine. So we're looking at an engine that gets better mileage, more power, especially in the low range, and, it lasts 3 times as long. What's not to like, especially since alcohol is cheaper than diesel or gasoline?
It sounds amazing. Now, one of the things that we had seen at the Prepper Expo, where we met you, Dave, is the stills. There's some beautiful stills out there in order to do this right in your own backyard.
Well, when it comes to doing it yourself, there's some practical considerations in my mind, because I've been doing this, you got to remember, since the late 70s. So I used to work for Mother Earth News, and we promoted making alcohol yourself, but the way we did that is somewhat practical. We would try to make 100 gallons in a day. Now, it's not all in one day, but the distillation of the alcohol from the fermented mash would happen in one day. Why? Because you're not going to spend, hard enough to get people into their gardens to grow their own food.
Yeah.
But try to get them out there making their own fuel. It better not be more than a once-a-month chore, or they won't do it. So a lot of the pretty stills you see nowadays, they work, they do make alcohol, but they only make like 5 gallons at a time. So unless you're going to spend 20 days making alcohol, you really want to more practically have a bigger unit because we're all busy nowadays. So, so a thing that'll make 100 gallons in a day is typically a tank that's maybe for fermentation primarily, to put the corn in and add the yeast, and there's a couple other steps in there. And then basically the yeast eat the sugar and then poop out the alcohol. And when the alcohol gets up to like 12% in the mash, the yeast are having such a good party they keel over it. So at that point, you're ready to distill that 12% alcohol into basically high-proof liquor, which you're going to use in your car. So that's when the distillery comes in. It's the last part of the process to separate the alcohol from the mash. Now, if you have 1,000 gallons of mash, and what that tank would look like is about 4 feet in diameter and about 7 feet tall. Not very large, really, when you think about it. That tank will generate you 100 gallons of alcohol. And you can do that if you're using a waste product, and there's lots of food processing waste in this country.
Yep.
You could be looking at producing it for about, 40, 50 cents a gallon. So, yes, you save some money, but, you mostly save time by making a little bit larger still. Now, if you're asking me the best way to do this, I'm afraid to say, since I first started teaching this stuff back in 1980, America has lost its ability to make things. When you ask somebody about welding, they think that's a town in Korea, okay, where they build things, because people don't weld anymore. They don't build things anymore. So in reality, what we have found and what the direction we're following is there are people who would love to be in the business of sticking it to the oil companies and supporting their community, making their own fuel.
Right.
But weld a still, they wouldn't know one end of a welding torch from the other, and that's dangerous. So, so basically what they want is to be able to buy or finance a distillery that will make a small scale business that works in their community. So anywhere from 100,000 gallons, which would serve perhaps 100 people, so it's, remember the 100 gallons a day, well, technically that would serve 30 people if you did it every day. So 100,000 gallons is enough for me 3 times that small still size. That's what was running all the time. And now you've got, the amount of fuel you're making for 98 or 99 of your best friends and neighbors. Now, if you go to 1 million gallons a year, which is still a very small still, would fit inside your average small barn, maybe, 3,000 square feet, 30 by 100 or, that kind of thing. That little plant will now serve 1,000 people. And now that's a significant business because at 1 million gallons a year, if you're making it for 50 cents to $1 a gallon, depending on what you're using to make it from, and you're selling it for $3, well, that's a $2 million a year business net. By the time you pay, employees and all that other stuff, you're still making most of that money. And now that's a reasonable business, and you're providing a super important part of your community's sovereignty. One thing is food, another thing is energy.
That's one of the things we talk about, and I see that could be an amazing co-op opportunity for
absolutely
bringing people in on. Now, I guess the next phase of that is I've produced all this alcohol. I've got 1,000 people signed up that want to come get fuel from me. Can they just pump this into their gas tank and drive away, or is there something special that they need?
Some of them can. Since 94, America has been making flex fuel vehicles. So those are vehicles whose computer has been made a little bit smarter so it can handle a wider range of fuel-air mixtures. Alcohol just doesn't need as much oxygen as gasoline because it carries some with it in its chemical structure. So to adjust between the difference in oxygen needs between gasoline and alcohol, your computer has to mix the air and fuel at a different ratio. Well, that's all based on sniffing the exhaust with the oxygen sensor and adjusting how many pulses of fuel go into the engine from your fuel injection. Now, that all sounds like, for those of you who aren't technical, really complicated. And all it really means is a little bit different software in your car's computer, a little more width to the adjustability. Now, so you can buy those cars, flex fuel cars. They've been on the road. You can get them in city auctions and county auctions very commonly, because many cities got benefits for buying flex fuel cars for the last 20 odd years. So that's a good place to pick them up. But you can also buy them new at the dealer today. If anybody actually buys a new car, I don't know anyone anymore who can afford a new car, but that they're available there. Now, let's say you don't have a flex fuel. What's that?
I've never bought a new car in my life. I don't know who buys them.
Yeah, me neither.
How do they produce
only half
old
the
cars?
People, something like half the people in the United States buy new cars. The other half of us buy old cars. So, anyway.
Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there.
No, I'm just commiserating with you about our joint economic status, that neither of us could ever afford a new car. But be that as it may, if you don't have one of these fancy new flex fuel cars, there's a couple things you can do to get around this. And one is we sell a aftermarket little computer that plugs into your car in between the current computer and your fuel injectors. And it really is simply snap on. There's no wiring involved. So this computer changes the signal heading for the fuel injector to properly inject enough fuel for the amount of oxygen provided by the fuel versus oxygen from the air. This computer might be $300 or $400, depending on how many cylinders you have. And then your car can run on either alcohol or gasoline or any mixture of the two without ever thinking about it. You put whatever you want in the tank and it runs. And there are over 2,500 stations in the United States that sell alcohol at the pump. I mean, get that in your brain. If you go to one of the E85, in other words, ethanol 85%, station finders on the web, and there are a number. One that I recommend nowadays is Fuel Freedom Foundation. In other words, FFF, fuelfreedomfoundation.org. They have a very nice one. And you put in your zip code, it tells you right where the closest alcohol station is. So you can fill up now without making your own alcohol. That's a good start.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you don't want to buy a computer. Well, you're not quite sure if this is going to work or not. Here's the secret they're keeping from you now. That your car, as it is, will run on 50% alcohol without any changes whatsoever. If you weren't listening, like you were zoning out there, what I'm telling you is you can put alcohol in the car you own right now up to 50%, which means that's 50% of your money you don't give to transnational corporations, you give it to American farmers. How do you do that? Well, your car's computer is flexible. It's able to accommodate up to 50% without freaking out. You need the extra kit if you want to go up to 100%. But there's no reason why you can't get started today buying a gallon of alcohol and put it in your tank so that you can see that nothing at all happens. In other words, it's perfectly normal. You won't notice a thing. But there are differences. Your emissions start to get better from the first gallon you put in the tank. Alcohol is already 10% of your fuel. It's used to reduce the emissions of poisonous carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons. You can keep putting more alcohol in your tank. Let's say the second tank, you put in 2 gallons. Third tank, you put in 3. Remember, you haven't done a darn thing to your car. You keep going 1 gallon a week more until you get up to 50%. And you can keep going beyond that, paying attention to how your car runs. If it starts idling kind of rough with the latest fill-up, like you're up now to 70% alcohol, well, that's too far. And so you need to, on the next fill-up, don't put in any more than 6, because you've now discovered exactly what your car will tolerate without buying a separate little conversion kit. And now you can fill up like that all the time. Now, why do you do this stepwise? Because gasoline, as I said earlier, is the garbage dump of the oil industry, and stuff that won't even burn tar and varnish and all that is in the gasoline, and it's coating the inside of your gas tank. I mean, if you somehow cut your gas tank open, you could peel out a membrane of tar and varnish right out of the inside of the tank that's coating the tank.
I'll vouch for that.
Well,
I've actually cut open a gas tank and found that. So, yeah.
Yeah, or if you leave gasoline in your chainsaw for a month or two, and you can't start your chainsaw, you pull open the carburetor, and you'll find the whole inside of the carburetor is coated with this varnish, which you can peel out just like paper. Now, alcohol is a solvent, and it'll dissolve all that stuff out. If it dissolves it all at once, it's going to plug things up. This is not car damage. This is replacing your fuel filter. Okay, and you were going to say something there?
I was just going to say you end up replacing your fuel filter and possibly even your pump if a bunch of that lets loose.
Right. Now, replacing your fuel filter, folks, that's not car damage, okay? That's maintenance. Let's make a distinction here. Oh, that alcohol, it wrecked my car. I had to change my fuel filter. It's like, grow up, please, okay? That's just maintenance. But you can avoid that by going up a little bit of alcohol with each tank, and it will painlessly dissolve all the stuff out of your fuel system progressively until it's all gone. And then after that, you'll never have to worry about it again. So literally 1 more gallon per tank. So over a period of 5 or 6 weeks, you'll be up to 50% alcohol, and you'll never have a dirty fuel injector. You'll never have any problems with your float, your gas tank or your fuel pump. It'll always be spick and span clean. Now, when you do this, you unfortunately have this problem, because as all of us who've been around drug dealers would say, the first one is always free, right? So you don't pay anything to start using alcohol. You haven't paid for a conversion kit. You haven't had to do anything different except save money at the pump, because alcohol is 60 cents to $1 cheaper per gallon than gasoline in most places. So the trouble is you get kind of liking this, okay? You start jonesing alcohol for your car, And so what's going on is you start to enjoy screwing the oil companies, and you want to do more. So, that's when you buy a conversion kit and go up to 100%. So you start off, giving half your money to farmers instead of the oil companies. And then pretty soon you don't want to give any money to the oil companies. So this is like, an existential problem you're going to have to solve. Do I spend money to save money on gas, on alcohol, or do I keep giving the oil companies my money? What a choice, So yes, you're going to have to face that life-changing experience at some point.
So, Dave, you mentioned that you guys actually do sell that computer?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we sell them for almost any vehicle out there. Any kind of fuel-injected vehicle can use our kit. We just need to know your VIN number, which tells us what kind of little connector was used in assembly of your car, so we know what end to put on the wire, so to speak. So you just have to snap it on and not wire anything in.
Okay,
nice.
perfect.
Nissan Frontier, 2004.
That's how simple it is.
Yeah, I can pull my VIN up real quick. So what does a computer like that run? What are we looking at as
for a 4-cylinder? It's about $350, and it's $100 more per cylinder, per pair of cylinders.
Okay.
So if you go to a 6-cylinder, it's going to be $450 and $550 for an 8-cylinder.
Nice.
That's not
and
bad.
You'll pay that off within a year.
Yeah, well, the way I drive it would be within a month.
Yeah, we're both we're both doing about 10,000 miles.
It's going to be a little better than that because those of us who have let's say a heavy foot, gravity is stronger on our foot when we're driving, pulls it down on the exhaust pedal. The gas pedal. Well, alcohol has more horsepower typically than gasoline, so you get tempted to go a little fast, and that could be hazardous to your ticket health.
So my little Kia, I can go out and race the Porsches around now, right?
Now let's not get too wild.
There should have been crickets chirping after that one.
That's right. All right, Dave, we're running out of time, so I want to know, tell everybody how we can find you, find your book, find your kits, and anything else that you might have available to us to educate us.
Well, okay, all about me. you can find my book and my website at alcoholcanbeagas.com. I'm going to say that again because that's a mouthful. Alcoholcanbeagas.com. So all the information's there. Now, there's a movie out right now that's beginning to show around in private showings, and you would go to fuelfreedomfoundation.org. fuelfreedomfoundation.org. Now, the movie is called Pump, the movie, and I'm in it as well as a bunch of other people. It's a documentary about everything they don't tell you about the fact that there are other fuels to run your car instead of gasoline. And we are supporting that movie, one, because I'm in it, but I also helped in the storyline writing of it. And so you will be shocked and amazed at how well documented this movie was done by two Israeli producers whose philosophy was, you know, all the hatred in the world emanating out of the Middle East would go away if we didn't need so much oil.
Imagine
and so
that.
If we didn't need them, we wouldn't listen to them.
Well, his is a softer message, which is if there wasn't, I mean, you know, you could take that attitude like, okay, eat your oil, guys. But their attitude is, I mean, this guy lost a family member in the 6-Day War, and then he lost his sister and his niece in 9/11. So this guy just said, enough is enough. You know, enough of all this raging around. We just got to take away the reason for it. And, you know, the avarice over oil has got to end. And so the best way to do that is not let the corporations have all the control of fuel anymore. So, and all of us have a reason to want that. So I would recommend going to fuelfreedomfoundation.org and find out where the nearest movie is. Or you can call us, alcoholcanbeagas.org, and we do community theater showings where you can get a bunch of friends together. We have certain times you can do that, and then I will fly in by Skype, and I will answer questions for the crowd wherever you are, showing your friends how to get off of the oil addiction.
Dave, that actually sounds really interesting. And not only am I going to put that in the show notes and get that up on our website, but I'd certainly love to talk with you a little bit more about putting something like that together through our, you know, We Grow Our show and getting a bunch of people together to learn even more about this. So, yeah.
We'll have an alcohol
I'm thrilled
party.
to do it.
Have an alcohol party. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Well, as we say here at Alcohol Can Be a Gas, we're alcohol professionals, not professional alcoholics.
Love it. All right, Dave, thank you so much for your time. I hope to have you on again. And I'm going to put all this in our show notes and look forward to seeing what you have up there.
Yeah,
Always a pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
What will you do when your stored supplies run out? Are you prepared? Hostile Hair provides equipment and education you need to control your own infinite food supply. We have live food storage systems, rabbits, quail, and other urban livestock for any situation and strategy. Don't be limited by what's on the shelves. Get started with an infinite food source today. Get prepped, stay fed with Hostile Hair. Call 480-331-3761 or visit hostilehair.com.
All right, now that's the kind of interview I like. Of course, then I'm also an alternative fuels junkie.
Yes.
So, and this guy, he's doing what I want to do. I mean, he's got answers to questions that I was asking 10 years ago.
Well, he's doing it on a large scale himself.
Yeah.
He's got, you know, some pretty big things coming down the pike.
Yeah, and I mean, he's talking about building refineries for people, and you guys,
you know, and
if you guys have money to invest in this kind of a project, give us a call, contact us, and we'll get you lined up with them. And definitely, I mean, he's got some investment opportunities as well.
Yeah.
So either contact him or, you know, tell him that we sent you. Exactly. And maybe he can scratch our back a bit.
There you go. Yeah, I have never gave a thought to 1 million gallons a year being small.
Yeah, that's anytime somebody says 1 million, it's like, oh, he's exaggerating something.
Yeah.
But 1 million seems much more attainable after this last conversation.
Well, the fact that you can get 1 million gallons out of 3,000 square foot. Heck, wow.
Yeah.
Now, we talked off after the interview a bit to him as well. And we didn't get into on this podcast, but I think we will on a future podcast, is you don't just need the grain in order to do this. It's not that you only can use corn. He was talking about using food waste to do this. Waste from bakeries, waste from, things that are getting thrown away, especially the high sugar foods like candy factories. They toss a lot of this stuff and you can actually turn that into fuel. So you might even be able to get the initial raw material at a really good cost, and at the same time you're taking it out of the landfills, out of that waste, and actually doing something with it. That's freaking awesome.
Well, and this is, we've had a couple of episodes on composting, and that's great for making soil, but there's only so much soil you're going to need. And then on top of that, he even mentioned anaerobic digestion alongside of making pelletizing for fish and pelletizing for, was that on the air?
Nope,
Was that after?
that was after.
Gosh, we're going to have to
get him back on and go
we'll have
over
to,
all this stuff.
Anyway, so very exciting. Very exciting. Sorry, I was trying to pull up the website and it's just not working.
Oh, well.
So,
all right. So I also did not know that. I thought that once the corn went into this thing, if you were using corn, it was gone.
yeah.
I didn't know you could use it to feed cattle and it was healthier for them.
Yeah. In
Why
fact,
in the heck aren't we doing this?
well, because the American people are sold on the fact that, 70% of our tillable soil is going to produce food for our food. We can't take that food away from them and make fuel. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to eat. We'll all starve.
But we can take all the donuts that people throw away and make fuel.
True.
And we can take all the corn and we can make better food
Exactly.
our food.
We can make
We're
better food
always-
for our food.
We're always talking about growing food for our food. Well, there you go.
Yep.
Wow. This is cool.
Well, and then, he was talking about, and we mentioned it a couple of times, but the black soldier flies come into play here. All of that used brewer's barley and brewer's stuff can then be fed to your black soldier fly larva that
Key
will
to
reduce
livestock
it down.
integration.
Exactly. It will reduce the amount of waste that you have. And I think he said to pelletize it, but instead of pelletizing it, you can actually have a bioprocess to change it into a pellet or a wiggly little pellet.
Well, or dehydrate them and
Yes.
and produce some. The things you can do with it are amazing. Now, we've done a podcast on alcohol in the past, and that was more of a distilling at your house type thing and kind of how to get started with that. And I think it's a wonderful idea if you can distill, 25 gallons, 100 gallons, and you're doing it at 50 cents a gallon. I mean, heck, I think that's great. But there's some opportunities here to go out and help your entire community. And, just by purchasing alcohol, you're supporting some farmers. I love the idea.
As do I. I think that, coming from the Midwest, my dad, he tells me he's not for the use of grain for fuel because he's got that same idea. He knows what it costs to pick corn up out of the field. At his best, he's doing 280 bushel of corn per acre. And that's astounding. That's pretty awesome.
He's chemical fertilizing too, correct?
He is. He's chemical fertilizing. He's using Monsanto grains. He's doing everything that those farmers are stuck in. It's called a paradigm.
Yeah.
They're stuck in that because that's the way Dad did it and that's the way Grandpa did it.
Well, that's not Grandpa. Great Grandpa didn't.
Exactly. But what I'm saying, in my family,
Right.
my grandpa was probably the last generation that used organic seeds, and towards the end, he wasn't using that.
Right.
And by the end, I mean when he sold the farm to his son Greg. So in that transition, even before then, he was using GMO seeds because it was the bee's knees. It's Like, man, he knew all of the hard work that went into conventional farming. And this new stuff comes along and produces a lot more food.
And a lot easier.
It's a lot easier.
And then you can expand.
But just like David said,
Right.
The first drug is free from the drug dealer, but then you go back to it and it's not free after a while. Well, GMO corn now is like $200, $300 a bag.
Right.
And you're not buying corn, you're buying a lease on the technology that's in that bag.
Right.
And that's what's, anyway, we've gotten off track there, but let's just go back to the math. 280 bushel of corn off of my dad's best land, which is down in a river bottom, or excuse me, a creek bottom of the farm. And, that takes 18 to 20 gallons of diesel fuel per acre to plant, cultivate, spray, and harvest, and then till the ground afterwards. That's per acre. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of fuel.
Yeah.
And so 18 gallons, and then let's see, 280 bushel is 68 pounds per bushel on average. We'll call it 70. It's getting up there. It's about 1,000 pounds. 1,000 pounds is 100 gallons. So you're 75 gallons of alcohol per 18 gallons of diesel spent.
Wow.
Yes, it's a net gain, but it's still expensive to farm that.
Oh, heck yeah. Well, I mean, we've got to make some changes in this country. Mm-hmm. And, this is a way of doing it. So I think everybody should go to the website, go check it out, wegrowours.com, look at the episode 40. This is our big 40. I didn't even dawn on me until now. Did you know that?
Big 40, yeah.
This is big 40. So episode 40.
I don't want to say anything because that's like middle age.
This is big 40. Go take a look at that. While you're there, send a voicemail, ask questions, like us on Facebook, Twitter, follow us, all that good stuff. I do want to. All right. So go see David Blume. Now, I skipped this at the intro because we usually talk a little bit. So I want to apologize to everybody on our Facebook page who took me seriously. Okay, because I posted something.
This is something I learned not to do a long time ago.
I posted something about the sun going away for 6 days. I don't remember. It was a satire piece. I find it humorous. I found the post humorous, and it got me thinking. I wonder what people would actually do if the normal non-prepper would be able to get through 6 days of no daylight. It was supposed to be a conversation piece. I didn't mean to I put right in there that it was a satire piece. I didn't mean for people to take me seriously, so I'm going to apologize for that one.
Well, I thought was funny is the one guy, he said, you might as well say when sharks start flying around. I'm like,
with laser beams.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, they made a movie. It's called Sharknado. I am prepared for that.
I mean, it wasn't supposed to be serious, and I guess I'll watch our posts, and I apologize. I just,
no,
it was supposed to be fun.
Now we need to put up something more ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because now you guys are going to be looking for it.
I read satire news a lot, like The Onion. Have you seen The Onion?
I don't read.
They're stories that are really bad, but they're almost believable.
Oh,
they make them so they're almost believable. Like Obama, did this or did that. And it's sad because you can believe it. It's not real. It's so far out there, but it's still feasible. So I'm a fan of those sites, and I guess I just
Is that the one that puts out the things that there's some general that's moving to coup against Obama or something like that?
They put out all sorts. It's all satire stuff. It's supposed to be funny. So I guess I have a different sense of humor than some.
Yeah.
So it was a conversation piece.
Well.
No, mind you, I noted in the title that it was a satire piece. And in the first comment, which I made approximately 30 seconds after I posted it, that again, this is a hoax. We know that. So.
Well, the one lady, it was funny. One lady said that, it's like, oh, this is going to be like War of the Worlds with Orson Welles. I'm like, yeah, if we had that kind of a captive audience, great. I would love for that.
Well, and there was somebody that said they think most people would just probably, we'd have a lot of deaths.
Yeah.
But it's 6 days. Would we? 6 days? We're not talking about the electric grid going down. I don't think. In 6 days of darkness, what would most, I mean, the grocery stores would still be open. It'd be very interesting. And that was what it was a piece that I was hoping to have that kind of conversation as to actually what would happen.
Yeah.
I screwed up.
Watch, in December, the world will stop turning for 6 days.
Well, that would be a little different if the world stopped turning than if it was darkness for 6 days. This was an ash cloud.
Oh, an ash cloud.
Yeah, a solar storm would.
I didn't read it.
You didn't even read it.
No,
Yeah.
I just saw the comments.
If the world stopped turning, I think, gravity might be affected. And there'd be some flooding and some other really bad stuff that happened. That would be a SHTF scenario.
Yeah, the fit would definitely hit the shan in that scenario.
That's right. All right. With that said.
All right, my back hurts. I'm tired. I'm going to go home and make some alcohol. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you again next week.